What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Paul Macetta, and I am a researcher in the field of influence, persuasion, and human communication. So if you like learning about influence, persuasion, and human communication and how you can level up your communication skills, then sit down and stay tuned and consider subscribing to the channel and hit that bell notification so you get updated when I release more videos like this. So today's video is all about how to get your prospect to clarify their language when you are communicating with them so that you can close them faster, get to the sale, overcome resistance, etc., etc. Now, the truth of the matter is, this technique that I'm going to share with you in this video is not only limited to sales. In fact, this technique could be applied in just about any scenario or situation where you are communicating with someone with the intention of influencing and persuading them, but really specifically what you're doing is you're getting them to speak more clearly. Because lots of times when people communicate, they actually don't speak clearly. So the world of NLP tells us that when most people process information and when we communicate, we violate three things. There are three main violations that we perform. First are generalizations, where we say things like everybody or everyone or no one or people. We kind of generalize when we speak. The second violation is called deletion, and this is where we literally delete things from our conception of how events took place. So, for example, I might tell you a story about how a guy assaulted me and then I fought back and beat him up and then I got arrested, but I leave out the part that I accidentally crashed into his car and kept driving, and it wasn't until he caught up to me that the fight broke out. That's an example of deletion. The third violation is what we call distortion. So this is closely related to deletion, but we're not exactly deleting the information. We're just kind of distorting the facts. And so this is where somebody might change the context of something so that things are more favorable to the person who's actually telling the story or describing the event. Now, the problem with this is that when you are trying to communicate with someone, especially with the intention of influencing, persuading, or selling them, and they are using generalizations, deletions, and distortions, you can imagine that the task at hand is going to become that much harder. And so what I'm going to share with you today is an NLP technique that will enable you to overcome these challenges. This comes straight from my book, The NLP Meta Mastery Guide. And guys, I'm hooking you up with a free field guide that is based off of this book. I put a link in the description. It's in a Google document. You don't even need to opt in to get access to this field guide. I'm going to hook you up with it. Go check the description for that. But for now, let's jump into the technique. So again, this comes straight from the book, and this is known as the unspecified noun challenge. So what is this? This is a questioning technique that forces the prospect to specify vague references, revealing their true concerns or motivations. So here's how it works. When someone uses vague nouns like people, things, or it, you ask them to specify exactly what or who they mean. So this is when you use this. You use this when a prospect, or really anybody that you're communicating or engaging with, starts to make vague claims, statements, or objections. So when you're gathering buying criteria, or when uncovering hidden decision makers, you want to pay attention to when they are doing stuff like this. Because if you don't, what could wind up happening is you can find yourself in a situation where you're not really overcoming the true objection, or if you're having a dialogue with someone, you're not actually getting to the point. And so what happens is you kind of just wind up in this stalemate where the interaction isn't really going anywhere. So this works, especially in sales settings, because vague language hides real objections. So when you force specificity, it brings the real issue to the surface where you can then address it. So realize that most of the time, when someone gives you an objection, it's not the real objection. Most of the time, what they are giving you is some sort of vague objection, which is covering up the real objection. And most of the time, the reason for that is because the person just doesn't want to make a decision. They are being indecisive. Indecisiveness is not like a favorable quality or trait. It's not like viewed as something favorable by most people. So most people don't want to be seen as indecisive. But rather than saying, I'm undecided or I can't make up my mind, what they'll usually do is give you a vague objection. Now, you'll also notice that if you're in like a debate with somebody, or you're just in a dialogue with somebody, and let's say you challenge them or you back them into a corner on a specific topic and they don't really have an answer for it, what you'll notice is that they will often resort to vague statements because they're trying to cover up for the fact that they don't actually have a specific answer or a specific way to address whatever it is that you challenge them on. So examples in a sales setting are: prospect says, people say this is expensive. So you ask them, which people specifically? Or they say, things aren't working out. You say, what specifically isn't working? You see, if you don't ask these questions, if you don't get the prospect to specify what they're talking about, you run the risk of going into this area where you're essentially, like, for example, in example number one, let's say the person says, people say this is expensive, and you start going into trying to justify why it's not expensive or why the value is what they're getting in terms of the value is worth more than what they're paying, which is a valid objection, but it's not the objection in this case. But let's say you didn't address this and you went down that rabbit hole of now trying to overcome that objection. Well, like, for all you know, the people that this person is referring to could be completely incredible. Like, it could be somebody that doesn't know anything related to the topic of what you're talking about. In fact, it could be just something that they heard in a different context and maybe they misunderstood it. And so sometimes just clarifying that makes the expensive objection itself go away. And so this is the importance of getting people to be specific. A detailed example of this is when a prospect says, I need to think about it. This is a classic objection. I need to think about it. And so the salesperson responds with, well, what specifically do you need to think about? The prospect will then reveal, well, the ROI timeline. Right? How long is it going to take me to make back the money that I'm spending or investing? So now the real objection is exposed and it can be handled directly instead of hidden behind vague delay tactics. You see, the reality is when someone says they need to think about it, in most cases, like with the exception of like very big purchases or things that could drastically affect their life in the future, which is like, let's call it 5 to 10% of the decisions that most people make. Most people are not making decisions on that level. When they say they want to think about it, maybe they do need to think about it, but the reality is They don't need to go home and think about it. They don't need to disengage from the interaction to think about it. They can actually think about it right then and there because it's not going to require that much time. What they need in most cases is guidance on what specifically they want to think about, because in a lot of cases, people don't even know what they want to think about because they don't even know what their real objection is. They might have multiple objections circulating in their mind. Some may be valid, some not valid. But the reality is they might not even be sure what the objection is. And so your job as a salesperson is not to close them, not to coerce them, not to manipulate them, but to guide them. And that's what every expert master communicator does, is they guide people. They help guide people to a decision. And asking these types of questions will help you do that. And so, like I said, guys, this comes from my book, Meta Model Mastery. The name of this book is, this gives you 83 precision question patterns to expose objections, control conversations, and close with confidence. But like I said, I'm hooking you up with a free field guide for this. It's in the description. It's in a Google Doc. No opt-in required. Just go and grab it, access it, have a blast with it. If you found this information valuable and helpful, let me know and I'll make more videos like this. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you get updated when I release more videos like this.